Welcome back, mystery lovers. I have a very special announcement today, and that is that I've just decided let's go ahead and finish the book today. It's going to be a longer haul than we usually do, but I'm just ready to share the rest of it with you. This is the reading of A History of Murder, which is book 1 in my Jericho Falls Cozy Mysteries, and today we're going to read the final chapters and the epilogue. I know that there are several of you who have been reading and following along this entire time as I do this chapter by chapter, and I appreciate you so much. And if you're one of those people, I just would ask that you would leave me a little comment in the comments of this video, and I would like to reach out to anyone who's been following along. So just leave me a comment, let me know that you have been here, and I have some special plans for those of you who have listened and been my friends along this journey. So I have my Fresca and my Celebrate cup because we're going to celebrate the end and read the final chapters of A History of Murder. This one is chapter 40, Down, Home, Hoedown. I found myself standing in the exact location where I was attacked a few nights before. It was an eerie feeling. So much had happened in such a short amount of time in Jericho Falls. Thank God I hadn't been wearing this get-up that night. I looked down at my formal attire. I felt ridiculous, like I was trying too hard, putting on an act. What for? Guests from the ball were strolling through Riverside Park, walking to and from the event in their formal wear. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I needed to get out of there. I hurried across the street and into the park to find a place to sit. My feet were killing me. These stupid fancy shoes. I sat on a bench facing the river and watched the water flow by. I thought about Christy, then about Art. I thought about how difficult it was not having answers when someone dies. I wasn't going to let Grandma suffer the way I had all these years. I was deep in thought when I felt a tap on my bare shoulder. I let out an impulsive short yipe and spun to see who had touched me. Blake came around in front of me with his hands raised. "Easy, easy," he said. "Why are you out here?" I asked. "You should be inside, schmoozing the masses." He lowered his hands and stuffed them into his pants pockets. The evening light looked good on him. He was wearing a tux with an emerald green cummerbund. A coincidence that we matched? More likely, Bree's doing. "Ah, this is Anthony's night," said Blake. "The development company paid for this whole thing. He might as well enjoy it." "That's a lot of money," I said, raising my eyebrows. He gave me a crooked smile. "They're trying to charm the city into giving them the go-ahead on their development plans." "And what are your thoughts on the plan?" I stood, and we began to walk down the pathway together. "I hate it. And don't worry, it won't pass. The majority of the town is dead set against it. The city council knows it and aren't going to go against the townspeople. Plus, Champion Hospitality Corp still hasn't raised the capital required, despite some pretty hefty investors." I stopped and crossed my arms, looking at him. "Then why lead Anthony on and let the company spend a small fortune to host this grand event? Why not throw the usual down-home Jericho Falls hoedown?" "Not my idea." He shook his head. "The city council is tired of the company's relentless marketing and pushiness. They saw an opportunity to make tonight something special for the 150th anniversary. All on Champion Hospitality Corp's dime." I scowled. "I know, it's not cool, but when I tried to talk them out of it, the council accused me of only wanting to save my brother some dough." Blake shrugged. "But hey, I didn't come out here to complain about my workday problems." I stayed quiet, arms still crossed. Blake looked nervous. He took his hands out of his pockets and rubbed them together before speaking. "I saw you slip out. I wanted to make sure you were, all right." I put my hands on my cheeks. "You saw me choke?" Blake gently lowered my hands and Blake gently took my hands and lowered them. He raised my chin with his index finger so he could see my eyes. Of course I did. I haven't taken my eyes off of you all night. You look gorgeous. Blake, I moved away. I'm just stating the facts. I couldn't let the night go by without telling you. Thank you, I said. An uncomfortable silence hung between us. Finally, Blake said he should be getting back inside, and he turned to go. My gaze returned to the rushing river. I called to him, Blake? He turned back to look at me. It's about Christy, I said softly. He took a tentative step in my direction. I know you didn't mean to hurt me. We were just kids, caught up in something terrible. His posture immediately changed. His shoulders dropped, and his head fell backwards just a bit. It was as if he had finally put down a 50-pound weight he'd been carrying all these years. He closed his eyes and nodded. That means a lot. I couldn't let the night go by without telling you. He smiled and started to go. Blake, I stopped him again. This week, I was in the field behind Jericho House. Yeah? Do you remember carving our initials into a tree out there? He frowned and shook his head. No. We did write that message in the belfry at the college, though. He gave me a sneaky grin. I rolled my eyes and knew I was probably blushing. Why do you ask? He said. I saw a B and C carved in a tree out there. It's probably just a coincidence. Probably, he echoed. However, the look on his face as he turned to go told me the carving interested him just like it did me. I suspected the story of how Jeannie came into Jericho House to take Christy's diary would intrigue him even more. Unfortunately, I had more pressing things to contemplate right now, so I waved at Blake and watched him walk back to the Opera House with a lighter step than I had seen from him in a long while. I returned to the park bench and thought about my conversation with Blake. Having others around who remembered Christy was comforting. I had tried so hard not to think about her over the years. I saw now that reminiscing was a way to keep her with us, at least in our hearts. Who was thinking about art in an effort to keep him alive? His daughter, I guessed, in her own wacky way. And what about George Vandenberg? Surely he had loved ones who remembered him as well. I frowned at the thought of the internet search I had left earlier. It was worth it. Bree was worth it. But still, I was itching to know more about Vandenberg. Dead or not, I had the feeling he was at the center of things. I opened the tiny clutch purse and retrieved my phone. I quickly typed in a new search and found the obituary again. Skimming through the details, I came to the list of survivors. Chief Garner had told me that Vandenberg's wife and children left him years ago when he turned criminal. Where were they now? I typed in George Vandenberg heirs. The first result wasn't him, but the second one held promise. I clicked on the link to a public records database. George Vandenberg's family was listed as wife Maria Rossetti Vandenberg and 2 children, a daughter and a son. All at once, I got a sinking feeling in my gut, which didn't have anything to do with those stuffed mushrooms. I almost couldn't hold my hand steady enough to type the name into my phone. Images of Maria Rossetti Vandenberg and children. The search results came up immediately. An attractive woman was standing with her arms around 2 children. The boy was about 10 at the time, the girl in her teens. The caption read, Maria Vandenberg with her children, Isabella and Chase, at state gymnastics finals. It wasn't just the myriad of medals hanging around the young Isabella's neck that caught my attention. Although she was much younger, the person I knew as Mariah Langley wasn't hard to recognize, especially given that the photo was an exact duplicate of the magazine cover in the ticket booth. I fumbled with my phone, slipping it back into my purse. My pulse was well over 100, and my hands were now shaking and sweaty. Hadn't Mariah told me that she didn't know Art before hiring him to work at the opera house? I would swear to it. It had to be a lie. Mariah, or Isabella as it was Vandenberg's long-lost daughter. But how did the tunnels and Malcolm fit in? I snapped my purse closed and adjusted it over my shoulder. There was only one way to find out, and this was a perfect time with everyone else occupied at the ball. But first, a detour. Chapter 41. A Different World. The 3-block walk back to my truck was almost more than I could take. The fine cords of the silver sandals were cutting into my pinky toes, while the back of my left heel was on fire. How did women do this? I ditched the fancy shoes and slipped into my faithful Converse high tops. Then I swapped out the flimsy black wrap for Grandma's chambray button-up. Heaven! I caught sight of myself in the reflection of Bree's beauty salon window. The mismatched outfit was comical, but I didn't care. I hoofed it back down the street to the opera house and slipped in through the notorious side door. I took an immediate left. I crept down the darkened staircase that I had ventured down with Mariah on my very first visit to the opera house. When I reached the bottom of the pitch-black staircase, the door was shut, but unlocked. I pushed the door open and closed it behind me. I was met with more complete darkness. "Hello?" I called out timidly, not really intending to get an answer, but wanting to make sure I was alone. There were no sounds. Convinced that I was safe for the moment, I began searching the wall for a light switch. I didn't have to feel around long before I located one. I flipped it up, and the room was flooded with white fluorescent light. I put my hands over my eyes to shield them from the brightness and scanned the room. As I remembered, it was filled with boxes, props, material, tools, you name it. I figured the best place to look for access to a tunnel would be in the corners of the room. To be safe, I switched the light off and resorted to my phone's flashlight instead. After a few seconds to let my eyes adjust, I went to the far side of the room. The walls were constructed of concrete and brick. I searched where the floor met the wall, moving items as needed, but trying not to make too much noise. Directly in the corner sat an enormous box. It looked like it could hold a commercial refrigerator. There was no way I could move it by myself. I leaned against it in defeat, but much to my surprise, it slid easily against my weight. The box was completely empty, only placed there for show. I eased it away from the wall, creating just enough space to slip in behind it. Right away, I found a large dark hole in the wall. Smaller ones, drilled in the cement at each corner, suggested there had once been a hinged door covering it. But now only a large, cavernous space yawned out ahead of me. The air coming out felt cool and smelled damp. I knew that this tunnel would lead to Main Street underground, like Joy the librarian explained. I shone the light of my phone into the crevasse. Only a few feet were illuminated, but I made out what looked like a large work table and some equipment inside. Moving a bit closer, I could see a laptop, tubes of rolled up maps like Anthony had shown me earlier, and various papers on the table. Dread grew in me when I recognized Anthony's trusty monogrammed briefcase sitting underneath it. That's why I never saw him cross the room. He had entered this evening not through the front door, but through the tunnels. Was this the work that he told Bree he had to do before arriving? How Anthony was associated with Mariah, or more correctly, Isabella Rossetti, I didn't know. But I was sure it had to do with Art's murder. The only way to learn more was to go in there and see what that paperwork was all about. I stepped inside the tunnel. Instantly, it was as if I had entered a different world. The air was still and heavy. Dense, muted silence clung to me. I went quickly to the table with my phone's flashlight illuminating the way. I began to swipe it across the table's surface. What were they doing down here? I gasped when I saw the name Lillian Martin on the documents. They were her bank statements. Grandma Lily's private information was right here, laid out, neatly arranged by month. Whoever was responsible was keeping a close eye on her account balances. Spread out beside the bank statements was a map of the Champion Hospitality Corp development plan. It looked like the one Anthony had displayed on the hood of his truck that afternoon. That is, except for one crucial addition. On this version, a red line was drawn around the place where Jericho House and its surrounding acreage were located. The words "Expansion Zone" were written across it. I scanned the tabletop once again. A creased piece of lined paper caught my eye. I unfolded it and felt my heart drop. It was a handwritten letter to my grandma. Dearest Lily, the last year has been the happiest of my life. Until now, I have not known what true love was. In fact, I have not been honest with you about my past. This was a confession from Art for Grandma Lily. In it, he explained what he had done to Nancy and others over the years. I don't know if it's possible. After all, I have wronged many people in my lifetime, but I want us to be happy. I want to have a real life together, no more scams or lies. As proof that I do not expect anything from you except your love and companionship, I have written a new will. It makes you my sole beneficiary. I want nothing from you but your love. I love you, Lil. A. I couldn't believe it. Art was coming clean. He wanted to go straight and make a life with Grandma Lily. Apparently, this didn't sit well with someone. I needed to get upstairs and tell Chief Garner everything. He could help me piece it all together. I snapped my cell phone inside my clutch purse. The resulting click reverberated down the tunnel. I looked into the pitch blackness and wondered who could be lurking down here, watching me. My breathing became shallow, and I was hit with how crazy I was coming down here all alone. I dashed back to the Opera House basement and hurried across the room as fast as I could. The darkness seemed to claw at the nape of my neck as I ran upstairs for safety. With each step, I could hear the music more clearly. I could sense the warm, welcoming space mere steps away where the townspeople were enjoying themselves. I reached the top of the staircase, where there was light once more. I was almost home free. "Chloe," said a voice I recognized. Mariah stepped out. Her face looked strange to me. "Now what have you been doing down there?" "Mariah, there you are. I was up looking for you." My words were cut off when she raised her arm to reveal a small pistol. "Please, no," my voice quivered. "I'm sorry, Chloe." She shook her head as if she actually regretted this. "And just in case you're wondering, it's not a prop." She cocked the gun to prove her point. "It was you." Mariah chuckled, now pointing the gun between my eyes. She smiled venomously. "But why?" She smirked. "He owed me." "Owed you what?" "Art and my father were business partners. My dad died before Art could finalize the deal on their last project." "You mean taking Nancy Phillips for all she was worth?" "Something like that. Anyway, half of that was my dad's, and Art still owed us." "But Art was broke. The attorney said so." "That's where your grandma came in." Mariah gave a sweet false grin. "I discovered her and contacted Art. I told him he could make it up to me if he'd take Lillian Martin's estate." A cold chill sank through my chest. This was why Art came to town. Mariah didn't post a job for a handyman. She intentionally brought him here to con my grandma. No wonder she didn't have his job application. "But Art couldn't go through with it," I said. "You didn't anticipate that he'd actually fall in love with Grandma Lily." Mariah sneered. "And so he had to die. One way or another, he was going to pay. But Chloe, enough about me. Let's talk about you, poor thing. You must have struggled terribly living with the guilt of killing your best friend. In fact, the pressure of being back here, facing what you did, might cause you to do something drastic, like shoot yourself." She took a step forward. The gun was now only inches from my forehead. "You were the one who broke into Art's house." I was only stalling now, bringing up anything I could think of to keep her talking instead of shooting. She shrugged. "I wanted to clean up any connections to my dad or me." "And you took the faces out of the jigsaw puzzle. That's what Judge was chewing on this morning." Mariah didn't comment, but I thought I noticed her eyes become teary. Inside this cold-hearted criminal was also a girl who missed her father. The puzzle's image of the happy dad and daughter must have been too much. With her free hand, she wiped at the corners of her eyes, and I remembered the first day we met. When she was supposedly so broken up about Art's death, she had made the same gesture. Only that day, I had missed an important detail. There was nothing for her to wipe away. She didn't shed a tear. And speaking of faking it, "Hey, what happened to your limp?" I asked her. She rolled her eyes. "I was never hurt. I saw you snooping around that night, and I had to do something. But even after I staged a break-in, you still wouldn't leave us alone." I glanced at the steep stairway behind me. Could I manage to get down there and hide? "If you run, I will follow you. I know those tunnels like the back of my hand." I believed her. "How did you do it, Mariah? Art was a tall, strong man." She smiled as if proud to tell me. "I was cleaning up after the show. Art had gone, so I was alone. Soon enough, though, he came back. He said he had decided to ask Lily to marry him. He wasn't going through with our plan. He turned his back on me, and he began to walk away. Before I knew what I was doing, I took the antique walking stick used in the show that night and swung it at him. It hit the back of his head. I never intended to kill him. I was just so angry. When I found the letter for your grandma and her blue ribbon in his jacket pocket, it gave me an idea. I drove him to Jericho House and left him in Lily's flower bed." "Does Luke know what you did?" "My only regret is that I needed his help to move Art." A single tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away with the back of her free hand. "Of course, I have to silence you now, Chloe. You should have stuck with your original plan and left town right away. Now you know too much." I inched backward, precariously close to the top step. She raised the gun. "Mariah, stop!" Her brother appeared behind her. Mariah faltered for a second, lowering the gun a fraction. She gained composure and spoke to her brother without taking her eyes off me. "Luke, go away." Luke looked at his sister and then at me and back again. "What's going on? You told me Art had an accident. Was that a lie?" All at once, Mariah pushed past me and dashed downstairs. I heard the deadbolt click behind her. In the theater, a song ended, the band went quiet, and at that exact moment, Luke screamed, "Mariah, come back!" His voice echoed through the theater for everyone to hear. I was still hugging a sobbing Luke when Chief Garner and Officer Porter came towards us. "What happened?" Garner asked briskly. I pointed at the basement door. "Mariah's in the tunnels. Be careful. She has a gun." Garner looked at me questioningly. I nodded. It was her. Luke and I were shuttled away to a safer location, and the next few moments were a blur. People shouted and rushed up and down stairs. Uniformed officers arrived, and their radios were projecting voices and static intermittently. I alternated between feeling faint and panicked. In the chaos, I noticed Anthony White and Malcolm Griggs in the group. Am I dreaming? I certainly felt like I was in a fog. Anthony came to me, took my elbow, and guided both Luke and me into the ballroom. The other guests were being directed outside by the Opera House ushers. Please stay calm and form a line to the exit. The police are on the scene. One of them announced this over the microphone. Some of the women were crying. Everyone seemed shaken. I looked up at Anthony, who was still holding onto my arm. "Thank God you're all right," he said. "When I couldn't find you or Mariah, I knew it was bad." "Were you involved in this?" "Yes, but I didn't hurt Art." "How then?" I asked. Art invested his life savings into Champion Hospitality Corp. "Correction," I interrupted. "He invested Nancy Phillips' life savings." Anthony nodded. "I had no idea at the time, I promise. I met Art at Fabiani's when he was still a waiter. I told him about my project in Jericho Falls. He said he'd like to invest. Come to find out, he only did it to hide the money from Mariah." "Go on." "When Mariah heard that my company landed a new investor named Art McMillan, she was furious. She thought he should have given her the money. That's when she came up with the plan to invite Art to Jericho Falls and set up your grandma." "You knew?" Anthony looked pained. "Not at first. Art living in Jericho Falls so soon after investing in my project seemed fishy, so I started asking questions. Eventually, Art and Mariah told me what they were doing. They promised to get Lily's property included in the development if I kept quiet." I couldn't stop myself. I slapped him. Anthony reached up and touched his cheek, which was already turning a vibrant pink. "I'm sorry, Chloe. It got out of control." "A man died because of this, Anthony, and then you watched Mariah try to frame Grandma Lily for the murder. Why didn't you just go to the police?" "She told me she'd hurt Bree if I talked. She said she would sabotage Blake's election, too. I believed her." Anthony became even more upset. I shook my head in disgust. "I owe you another apology, Chloe. I was the one who grabbed you that night. I was trying to scare you away from here, for Mariah. I never meant to hurt you." It was Anthony who attacked me? Not Malcolm? The whole world seemed topsy-turvy. Anthony held my gaze for only another moment before Officer Myers approached. "Mr. White, you'll need to come with me to the station," he said gravely. It seemed that the threat of big business coming into Jericho Falls had passed, at least for now. I suddenly had the feeling that someone was watching me. When I turned around, I found myself looking at the chief. He walked up and drew me into a hug. "It's going to be okay," he said. "We have Mariah, or rather Isabella Rossetti, in custody. We found documents in the tunnel proving her guilt, and plane tickets. If you hadn't caught her tonight, Chloe, Isabella and Chase Rossetti would have escaped. They were planning to fly to safety in Rome tomorrow morning with their big paycheck from tonight's ball." "Of course! Anthony's company paid for all this. He was funding his own partner in crime." I stepped back so I could see Garner's face. "Mariah confessed to everything, you know," I told him. "Anthony, too." "Good. I want to hear every word," he smiled. "I'm glad you're safe." I caught sight of Malcolm Griggs once again. He appeared to be assisting the officers on the stairwell. I couldn't figure out why he was here, let alone in an official capacity. He looked up and came in our direction. He was no longer in disheveled, dirty clothing. Now he wore a neat pinstriped suit and a pristine white shirt. He reached for something on his belt and flicked his wrist to reveal a badge. "Peter Stone, private investigator," he said stoically. I blinked. "Blake White hired me several weeks back to follow his brother and determine what he was up to. He suspected that Anthony was fooling around on Bree with Mariah Langley, but never all of this." "That's why you were at the park that night, and using the tunnels?" "That's right. I discovered the tunnel system after following Anthony around town," he said. "So Mariah met with Art and Anthony in the tunnels to keep their association secret?" I asked. Both men nodded. "We think so," Garner said. "There's no better place to hold clandestine meetings." I looked at Garner. "Did you know that Malcolm was really Peter Stone?" I was sworn to secrecy, he said. But yeah, I knew early on he wasn't our killer. I only regret I didn't look into Mariah earlier, Peter Stone said. I might have been able to prevent Art's death, added the private investigator. I was shaking hands with Peter Stone and saying goodbye when I heard my name. Chloe! Blake rushed up to me. Chief Garner stepped away as Blake drew me into an embrace. Are you all right? Bree told me you got tangled up in all of this. He was breathing hard. I squirmed out of his hold. Thanks, I'm fine now. What happened anyway? He asked. You should know. You're the one who hired a private investigator to tail your own brother. Blake put his arms around me again. Chloe, you know Anthony. I couldn't have him ruining my candidacy. I'm just thankful you're all right. I spied Garner over Blake's shoulder. I wanted to catch his eye, to convey that this wasn't what he thought. It wasn't mutual. But Chief Garner purposely looked away. Chapter 42, The Key to My Future. Grandma, dropping that fork does not mean we'll be having an unexpected visitor, any more than Art breaking the mirror meant he would die, I said. You really need to take a break from these superstitions. Elliot meowed yeah. Jed yawned. We'll just have to agree to disagree, dear. Grandma looked at me and smiled as she finished drying the silverware. So let me get this straight, she said. Mariah's real name is Isabella Vandenberg, and she killed Art because he decided not to con me out of my estate after all? Grandma froze and looked at me with wide eyes. Whoa, now there's a sentence I never imagined myself saying. I laughed. I know, it's hard to believe all this happened. Chief Garner will release Art's letter to you after the trial, so you can see for yourself. It's true, though. Art was falling for you and didn't want to go through with the plan. Grandma Lily shook her head. I'm sorry, but I don't believe it. A tiger doesn't change its stripes. It was probably another one of his scams, this one against Mariah and Anthony, so he could keep all of my money for himself. I guess we'll never know, I shrugged. Speaking of money, now that you've finally come clean with Officer Garner, can he help Nancy's family? I think so, she said happily. State officials are working on an order requiring Champion Hospitality Corp. To return the money Art invested. Then it will be given to Nancy's children. At least something good has come out of this, I said. Not for Bree. She must be heartbroken. Grandma clicked her tongue as she refilled our teacups with her favorite spicy and sweet blend. She is. The engagement is off, and Bree's in utter disbelief that Anthony would get involved in something so terrible. Grandma sighed. Poor thing. I looked around the room. The morning sunshine and the knowledge that Art's murder had been solved made the whole world feel new and hopeful. Plus, I was on the brink of making a big announcement, one that would change my life. Grandma Lily's too. Maybe I should leave Idaho, I said. Where would you go? Grandma Lily asked. She had a twinkle in her eye and a suspiciousness about her. Oh, I don't know. Someplace small where I can finally put down roots. How do you feel about turn-of-the-century mining towns? I laughed. They're all right. I don't know, Grandma. It's just so scary. Of course it is. But admit it. Except for a mediocre job, you have nothing to go back to. Your parents are off exploring the world. What about your dreams? What about enjoying life? I'm starting to see what you mean, I admitted. You could use some romance, too. She raised her eyebrows 3 times fast. I don't see myself doing a lot of dating living under your roof, Grandma. Who said I wanted a roommate? I blinked, shocked. Sorry, I just assumed. She grabbed her crazy keychain and handed me a leash. Bring Jed and follow me. We went outside through the back porch and turned towards the brick garage, but we didn't go in. Instead, I followed Grandma Lily behind the antique building and came to a pretty little doorway at the back. It had a pot of pansies and a welcome mat out. "This was Grandpa's workshop," I said in awe. "It didn't look like this, though." Grandma Lily bit her lip with excitement as she unlocked the door, her keychain jingling. Jed followed me into a cozy studio apartment decorated in simple neutral colors. There was a small kitchen, a comfortable living room in the main space. A doorway in the back revealed a bedroom and bathroom. "Grandma, it's adorable." "I had it done when I remodeled the kitchen," she grinned. "I wanted to surprise you that first night, but you were so tired. And then, well, things got crazy." I looked at her with love. We hugged. "I want you to live in Jericho Falls, but I don't expect you to be a kid anymore. You need your own place." She uncoiled a key from her menagerie and tossed it to me. The white paper disc attached to it read, "New apartment." I had been carrying around the key to my future nearly every day of my visit and never even knew it. Jed hopped up onto the soft gray sofa. He sat up straight and began to pant. His pink tongue hung out, and he appeared to be grinning from ear to ear. "I think Jed approves," I smiled. Grandma sat down beside him and stroked his blonde, wavy fur. "Yes, I think his mind is made up. What about you?" I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "I'm ready to give it a try." I felt a wave of relief just saying the words out loud. "Good. And I have a feeling that Jed and I aren't the only ones who will be happy to hear the news." I joined them on the couch, leaning my head on Grandma's shoulder. Grandma, Elliot isn't too sure of me yet." "I'm not talking about the cat, dear. I'm thinking of two charming young men." I was only thinking about one. Epilogue. I took my time driving to Boise and back. I knew there weren't any emergencies on either end of the journey, so Jed and I enjoyed as many stops as we wanted. My meager belongings fit nicely in the small red pickup truck, and without much trouble, I was back on the road to my new home in Jericho Falls. Even though I wasn't in a hurry, I was eager to get back for a variety of reasons. First on my agenda was getting settled in my new place. I kept thinking about the cozy, chic cottage built just for me. Next, of course, was Christy's diary. What must it contain for Jeannie to be interested enough to lift it? I hadn't breathed a word about the incident to anyone, not even Grandma, since hiding it in the secret space inside the mansion. Then there was the question of starting college, yet to be decided. On that last stretch of highway, I passed the fateful Conoco station. Their lighted arrow-shaped sign still advertised, "Corn dogs, 2 for $1." Ugh, some poor penny-pinching soul is going to be very sorry. Garner really ought to use this place to his advantage. If he initiated a speed trap about 50 miles down the road, he and his officers could make a bundle for the city issuing speeding tickets. My stomach did a flip-flop. Speeding ticket! I tried to keep one eye on the road while I rifled through the jockey box and found the crumpled paper I had stashed there almost 3 weeks ago now. I had missed the due date by only 2 days. I eased off the gas and pulled onto the gravelly shoulder. I dug my cell phone out from my backpack on the passenger seat and under Jed's tush. I pressed the contact name I wanted and waited. It rang twice before he answered. "Hi, I was just passing the Conoco station and wondered if you want me to bring you lunch." He laughed. "I think I'll pass." "Good call. Actually, it occurred to me that I never paid for that speeding ticket. Do you have a warrant out for my arrest? Maybe I should stay out of Dodge." He laughed again. "I took care of that a while back," he said. "But you do need to get back to Jericho Falls as soon as possible." "Oh? Yeah, I need to question you about something." I gasped. "Is Grandma Lily all right?" Flashbacks of cop cars surrounding Jericho House filled my imagination. "Lily's fine. Everything is fine. I'm just wondering where you'd like to go to dinner tonight." I sighed and relaxed. "How about Fabiani's?" I couldn't help but smile. The end for now. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me. This has been such a fun project to read the entire book of A History of Murder to you here on YouTube. And I know that that was more than we usually do, but I was so excited to get to the end. Like I said, if you've been someone who's listened along, please just leave a comment in today's episode, and that way I can reach out to you. I have some goodies planned for those of you who have joined me here. And as I've said before, a professional version of this audiobook is in the works, and so I will keep you posted on that. And until next time, I just say thank you and cheers. Bye-bye now.